October 18th, 1942, North Africa. The heat here does not just sit on you, it presses down like a physical weight, baking the steel of the panzers until they are too hot to touch. The flies are relentless, swarming the eyes and mouths of men, trying to eat their rations of hard bread and Italian tinned beef. But inside the command tent of the Deutsches Afrika Korps, the atmosphere is colder than a winter night in Munich. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, holds a piece of paper that burns his hands more than the desert sun ever could. It is a directive straight from the wolf's lair in Rastenburg. It is the Commando Befehl, the Commando Order. The directive is explicit. It orders that any Allied commandos encountered by German troops, whether in uniform or not, whether armed or surrendering, are to be liquidated to the last man. No prisoners, no quarter. It violates the Geneva Convention. It violates the unwritten code of the professional soldier. Rommel reads the words, his blue eyes scanning the typed text, his face masked in a layer of dust and oil. Around him, the staff officers wait. The radio crackles with reports from the front lines, British patrols probing the minefields, the distant thump of artillery duels near El Alamein. The war is hard enough. It is a chess match played with tanks and blood across 1,000 miles of sand. But this order changes the game. It demands murder, not warfare. Rommel does not hesitate. He does not radio Berlin for clarification. He does not file the paper away in the archives for future reference. In front of his subordinates, he acts with the same decisiveness he uses to flank an enemy armored division. He crumples the paper. He strikes a match. The flame catches the corner of the Führer's order, curling the edges, turning the Supreme Command's decree into ash on the dirt floor of an African tent. He looks at his men. There is no speech, no grand declaration, just the silence of a moral line being drawn in the sand. He would fight the British with every ounce of tactical genius he possessed, but he would not become a butcher for Berlin. It was a moment of supreme defiance, a secret rebellion that would eventually tighten the noose around his own neck. Before we continue the story of how the Desert Fox found himself trapped between the Allies and his own government, make sure to hit that subscribe button and tell me where you're listening from. Which city? Which state? I'm curious to know who's brave enough to discover what happened to the only general respected by both sides of the wire. The defiance regarding the Commando Order was not an isolated incident. It was the crack in the dam. The war in North Africa was turning. The British Eighth Army, under a new and methodical commander named Bernard Montgomery, was gathering strength. They had the supplies, the tanks, and the air superiority that Rommel desperately lacked. The supply lines stretching back to Tripoli were being strangled by the Royal Navy and the RAF. Fuel was liquid gold. Ammunition was counted by the round. Rommel knew the tactical reality. Holding the line at El Alamein was impossible against the sheer weight of steel Montgomery was amassing. Maneuver was his only salvation. Withdrawal to a better defensive position was the only sane military option. Then came the second test. It is late October 1942. The Battle of El Alamein has begun. The sky is lit up by 1,000 guns, a barrage so intense it shakes the ground miles away. The German lines are crumbling. The Italians are breaking. Rommel prepares the order to retreat, to save the remnants of his veteran Afrika Korps to fight another day. But the radio operator hands him a priority telegram from Hitler. It reads, "To Field Marshal Rommel, it is with trusting confidence in your leadership and the superiority of the German-Italian troops that the German people and I are following the heroic struggle in Egypt. In the situation in which you find yourself, there can be no other thought but to stand fast, yield not a yard of ground, and throw every gun and every man into the battle." As to your troops, you can show them no other road than that to victory or death. Victory or death. The words hang in the stagnant air of the command vehicle. It is madness. To stand fast is to be annihilated. Rommel looks at the map. He looks at the reports of tank losses. He knows that obeying this order means the senseless slaughter of 50,000 men. He is torn between the oath of allegiance he swore to the Führer and the duty of care he owes to his soldiers. For a professional officer trained in the Prussian tradition, disobedience is anathema. But this is not strategy. It is suicide. For hours he wavers, the sound of British shells walking closer, churning the earth. Finally, the decision is made not by ideology, but by the hard logic of the front line. He chooses the men. He issues the order to retreat, defying the victory or death directive. He saves his army from total destruction, but the seed of distrust has been planted in Berlin. The hero of the propaganda reels is becoming a liability. The retreat across North Africa is a masterclass in delaying actions, but the strategic defeat is inevitable. By 1943, the war has shifted, the Americans have landed, the pincers are closing. Rommel is recalled to Europe, a man physically exhausted and mentally disillusioned. The propaganda machine keeps his face on the newsreels, but behind closed doors, the relationship with Hitler is fracturing. He is given a new assignment, one that carries the weight of the entire Western Front. Inspector of the Atlantic Wall, and later, command of Army Group B in France. The mission is simple: stop the Allied invasion before it can establish a foothold on the continent. Rommel throws himself into the task with a manic energy. He travels the coastline from Denmark to the French border. He walks the beaches of Normandy, his boots sinking into the wet sand, visualizing the coming storm. He knows the Allies will come with overwhelming air power. He knows that the static defenses, the concrete bunkers, the pillboxes, are a delusion if they are not backed by mobile reserves. He begins to transform the coast. He orders millions of mines to be laid. He designs obstacles, Rommel's asparagus, wooden poles tipped with explosives to tear apart gliders and landing craft. He works the engineers to the bone. He tells his officers that the invasion must be stopped at the high water mark. If the Allies get off the beaches, the war is lost. But in the high command in Paris and Berlin, there is a fatal disagreement. The old guard, men like Field Marshal von Rundstedt, believe in the traditional doctrine: keep the panzer divisions back, away from the coast, out of range of naval gunfire, and then launch a massive counterattack once the invasion force commits. Rommel argues passionately against this. He points to the sky. He knows that Allied fighter bombers will turn the roads of France into a graveyard for any tank column trying to move in daylight. He demands the panzers be stationed right behind the beaches, ready to strike immediately. The debate rages over maps and tables. It is a clash of eras. The First World War mentality against the Blitzkrieg reality. Hitler intervenes and, in typical fashion, chooses the worst possible compromise. He splits the control of the panzer divisions. 3 are given to Rommel, 3 to von Rundstedt, and 4 are kept as a strategic reserve under the direct control of the OKW, Hitler himself. It is a disaster in the making. Rommel is hamstrung. He has the responsibility to defend the coast, but not the authority to move the pieces needed to do it. The tension is palpable. Every day the channel remains calm is another day of anxiety. The weather reports are scrutinized. The moon phases are calculated. The waiting game is psychological torture. Rommel writes to his wife, Lucy, speaking of the heavy burden, the sleepless nights. He senses the catastrophe approaching, a train wreck he is powerless to stop because the switchman in Berlin is asleep at the wheel. June 6, 1944. The irony of history strikes. The weather is terrible. Gales, rain, low visibility. The German meteorologists predict no invasion is possible. Rommel, seizing a moment of perceived safety, leaves the front to drive to Germany for his wife's birthday and to meet with Hitler to beg for more reserves. He is hundreds of miles away when the sky over Normandy fills with the drone of thousands of aircraft. The paratroopers drop in the dark. The armada appears out of the mist like a phantom city on the sea. The phone rings at Rommel's home in Herrlingen. It is his chief of staff, Hans Speidel. The invasion has begun. The drive back to France is a nightmare of frustration. Rommel pushes his driver to breakneck speeds, but he knows he is already too late. The critical hours, the hours where the panzers should have been moving, are slipping away. And where are the panzers? They are sitting silent in their depots. The commanders on the ground are begging for their release, but the order must come from Hitler, and Hitler is sleeping. His aides, terrified of his temper, refuse to wake him. The rigidity of the dictatorship, the fear that permeates the command structure, paralyzes the German response. By the time the Führer wakes and releases the reserves, the Allies are ashore. The Atlantic Wall has been breached. Rommel arrives at his headquarters to find a situation spiraling out of control. The air superiority of the Allies is absolute. Every time a German column moves, it is strafed by typhoons and thunderbolts. The Jabos, as the Germans call them, rule the sky. Rommel drives to the front, visiting the command posts, trying to shore up the morale of men who are fighting under a storm of steel. He sees the devastation. He sees the burned-out hulks of the tanks that arrived too late. He realizes that the war is lost. It is not a matter of if, but when. The logic of numbers is undeniable. He begins to speak openly to his fellow officers about the need to end the war, to make peace with the West before Germany is obliterated. This is dangerous talk. The Gestapo is everywhere. The SS has ears in every mess hall. But Rommel is beyond caring about his own safety. He cares about the survival of his nation. He drafts a report to Hitler, a brutal, honest assessment of the situation. He writes that the unequal struggle cannot be maintained. He concludes with the ultimatum. I must ask you to draw the consequences from this situation. It is a demand for surrender. He hands it to Field Marshal von Kluge to forward to Berlin. He is signing his own death warrant, but he does it with the cold calculation of a man who has seen enough blood. July 17, 1944. A hot, dusty afternoon on the road near Livarot. Rommel is returning from the front in his open Horch staff car. He is discussing the desperate situation with his aides. Suddenly, the lookout shouts. 2 RAF Spitfires dive out of the sun, their cannons blazing. The driver is hit. The car swerves, careening off the road and crashing into a ditch. Rommel is thrown clear, striking his head on a rock. He lies unconscious, his skull fractured, his left eye swollen shut, covered in blood. The invincible Desert Fox has been taken out of the war, not by a grand strategy, but by the random violence of a strafing run, is rushed to a hospital, hovering between life and death. While Rommel lies in a hospital bed, fighting through the fog of a severe head injury, the world shifts on its axis. July 20th, 1944. A briefcase bomb explodes in the Wolf's Lair. Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg attempts to assassinate Hitler. The coup fails. The vengeance of the Nazi regime is swift and medieval. Thousands are arrested. Torture chambers in the Prince Albrecht Strasse are busy day and night. The Gestapo wants names. They want to tear out the root of the conspiracy. And in the delirium of pain and interrogation, names are spilled. One name, whispered by Caesar von Hofacker under severe torture, freezes the blood of the investigators. Rommel. The evidence against him is ambiguous. Did he know? Yes. Did he support the assassination? Historians debate this, but he certainly supported the removal of Hitler and a peace deal. To the paranoia of Berlin, that distinction does not matter. The most popular general in the Reich, the poster boy of Aryan success, is a traitor. But there is a problem. They cannot put Erwin Rommel on a show trial. They cannot hang him with piano wire like the others. It would destroy the morale of the army. It would shatter the home front. The hero must die, but the legend must remain intact. A plan is hatched in the dark corridors of power, a plan of chilling cynicism. Rommel recovers enough to return to his home in Herrlingen. He is under house arrest, though it is not officially called that. The phone lines are tapped. Men in trench coats watch the house from the woods. He walks with a cane, his head still aching, but his mind is clear. He knows the net is closing. He tells his son, Manfred, about the situation. He speaks with a calm fatalism. He knows the nature of the beast he served. On October 14, 1944, a car pulls up to the driveway. It is a Mercedes with Berlin plates. Two generals step out, Wilhelm Burgdorf and Ernst Maisel. They are not there for a social call. They are the messengers of death. Rommel meets them in his study. He is wearing his Afrika Korps tunic. The conversation is brief and professional. Burgdorf lays the cards on the table. The Field Marshal is implicated in the plot. The evidence is sufficient for a trial. A trial means disgrace. It means the stripping of rank, the confiscation of property, and the almost certain execution of his family as accomplices. But, because of his service, the Führer offers a choice: poison, a state funeral with full military honors, a pension for his wife, and a guarantee, a soldier's guarantee, that his family will not be touched. It is the final tactical decision of his life, a trade, his life for his family's safety. Rommel does not beg. He does not plead innocence. He looks at the generals and accepts the terms. He asks for a few minutes. He goes upstairs to Lucy. The details of that conversation remain behind the closed door, a private agony. He comes down, says goodbye to his son. "I will be dead in 15 minutes, he tells Manfred. It is stated as a fact, like a weather report or a supply log. There are no tears, only the rigid discipline of a man who has faced death 1,000 times, though never like this. He walks to the car. He carries his field marshal's baton. He gets in the back seat with the two generals. The car drives a few hundred yards down the road and stops in a quiet wooded area. The driver is ordered to step away. 5 minutes later it is over. The cyanide capsule works quickly. The man who commanded armies across 3 continents, who defied the British Empire and the American industrial machine, slumps forward, dead by his own hand, forced by the government he swore to defend. The official statement is released. Field Marshal Rommel died of his wounds sustained in the strafing attack. The nation mourns. A grand state funeral is held. Hitler sends a wreath. It is a lie of monumental proportions, a propaganda masterpiece masking a political murder. It is not until after the war that the truth emerges, revealing the depth of the betrayal. Erwin Rommel was not a saint. He served a criminal regime and fought for a cause that brought ruin to the world. But in the end, he found the limit of his obedience. He saw the madness and tried, too late, to stop it. He paid the ultimate price, sacrificing his life to save his bloodline, a final act of protection in a world gone mad. His legacy remains a study in brilliance and tragedy, a reminder that military genius is no shield against political tyranny, and that even the sharpest sword can be broken by the hand that wields it. From the sands of El Alamein to the quiet back seat of a sedan in Germany, the story of the Desert Fox is a warning from history. It tells us that duty is a complex burden, and that sometimes the bravest thing a soldier can do is say no.